Welcome to another episode of On a Legal Note by Carrie Geren Scoggins. Senate Bill 2566 is legislation being introduced which would end Christians and those of faith from having their civil rights violated while on the job or in their own private businesses, by being forced to violate their religious tenets of faith, their, quote, core values, when on the job or in their private businesses. There should be no need for Senate Bill 2566 since this is already the law. The federal Supreme Court upheld the Christian's legal right to adhere to, quote, core values, and the court precedent has already been set. Also, in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Nevertheless, there was an unlawful arrest made of an individual owning a private company, a cake baking company, that refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding, and these individuals were illegally placed under arrest when no law was broken. Their Christian civil rights had been violated. It is their legal right to adhere to their, quote, core values and their Christian religious tenets of faith, including that of Romans chapter 1. They were tried, and the judge found them guilty. Not long afterward, 7 attorney generals wrote in to have the ruling overturned as unconstitutional. The law says, according to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that Christians have protected class status under the law, and they cannot have their Christian civil rights violated, and this was upheld by the federal Supreme Court in the core values ruling. If Romans chapter 1 is the core values of their religious tenet of faith, as it is in Christianity, they cannot be forced to violate their religious tenets of faith in their business, nor if they're working as an employee for someone else's business. We see a similar suit brought forth here in Nashville, Tennessee, against Walgreens by a pharmacist being forced to sell Plan B abortion pills. When writing Walgreens, they returned a letter to me saying that it was their store policy that if it offends the store employees or violates their Christian civil rights, they're allowed to step away from the register and have another employee carry out the transaction. However, this pharmacist says the store violated his Christian civil rights and forced him to sell the Plan B abortion pill. Walgreens is now being sued for violating the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Selling the Plan B abortion pill, RU 486, is in direct violation of the Christians' core values of their religious tenets of faith, such as thou shalt do no murder, and those who do these things, and those who support those who do these things. Meaning, if he supports it by selling the item, then by his religious tenet of faith, he is found guilty of it in the eyes of God. Remembering scriptures saying, and their blood will be upon your hands. It is that pharmacist's Christian civil rights being violated by store policy. While the corporation of Walgreens may not hold to this policy, that individual store violated his civil rights. The Christian civil rights of the store owners of those that were arrested for refusing to sell a wedding cake for a same-sex marriage were violated due to their core values in the religious tenet of faith being that of Romans chapter 1. And again, Scripture saying, it's those who do these things and those who support those who do these things. And if they had made that cake and sold it to them for a same-sex wedding, in essence, they would be supporting those that do these things, as the Scripture says, and therefore, in the eyes of God, be found guilty of the sin themselves. This violates Christian civil rights and their legal right to, quote, adhere to core values. And, of course, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The court ruling finding them guilty of breaking the law should be carried to the federal Supreme Court, putting this action under the scrutiny of our constitutional civil rights and having this unconstitutional court ruling overturned. Then file suit against the law enforcement for wrongful arrest. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of This has been another episode of On a Legal Note by Carrie Geren Scoggins.